Hey everybody, welcome to Trash to Treasure Top 10. This is your host Al Powell. So what we're going to be doing with this series is we're going to take a look at recent sets that just came out about a month or so after their release date, so that we've had some time for them to settle into the standard environment and see where the prices have fallen on some of these cards. We're going to take a look at these bulk rares that you might not want to pull out of a pack, but we're going to try and get you excited about getting one anyway, right? So the idea behind this is that we're going to look at, I have a ranking system of 10 cards. We'll do an honorable mention and stuff like that just for fun, because why not? And then the criteria is it has to be below $1.50. And I chose $1.50 because there's one on here in particular that I think might be a green staple, and we'll get to that. It's probably my favorite card from the set. Probably because I pulled a foil one, but you know, that's just me. Whatever. So yeah, we're gonna just analyze these, talk about where they might fit into Commander, and hopefully give you some hope when you pull that bulk rare that you can actually use it in your Commander deck. So let's go ahead and get started with our honorable mention, Living Twister. So I think this is a really cool card. It's got some cool abilities on it, but I just think that it's going to be pretty limited to land matters decks as far as commander plays go. As far as commander play is concerned, and so it's going to have some really cool interactions with landfall and stuff, and so like probably see some play in Angry Omnath and maybe even the new Omnath from M20 and stuff, but you know. Oh, and I guess Lord Windgrace. There's probably some other places it could fit in, but those are the ones that I think it's going to be the best in. And that's, to me, that's just makes it a little bit of a limited card for EDH. But I think those decks are pretty popular. I'm sure they're fun to play. I haven't actually played one myself, unfortunately, but yeah. So let's kind of talk about what that card could do real quick. And so the cool interactions is that like you can bounce tap lands back to your hand. And so if you have ways to maybe generate double mana enough to bounce all your lands back to your hand, you can save yourself from an Armageddon and stuff like that. If you just keep drawing lands, you get a little bit of extra reach for 2 mana to shock something. So there's some cool things with this card. But yeah, again, like my main issue is like, does this fit into like every green red deck? Probably not, but definitely worth a consideration in like Windgrace decks, Omnath decks, stuff like that. So let's get to our real list here. Starting with number 10, I have Planewide Celebration. So what I really like about this card is that it's modal, and it's got that confluence cycle wording on it where you can choose the same mode more than once. And it's got 4 modes, so it's choose 4. So in a sense, it's like, just in that part, it's almost, I'm not saying it is, it's almost as good or better than the other ones. But the abilities are still a little bit lackluster, and that in comparison to those confluences. So, but I think it could see playing a number of different strategies for sure. The most prominent one that I could see this being played in is like a counters matters strategy, or like tokens, because you can either proliferate 4 times, which is really good, and that's not even, we're not even talking about like Super Friends decks or anything like that, but um, like Precon Atraxa, or if you're playing like Ishai and Rayan, Blast of the Abzan, this is like a really good card to have in there. And yeah, it is 7 mana, and it's like, do you even want to play that over something else? Maybe not, maybe, but I think it's got, like, modal cards are always powerful, right? And so it's just got that, like, it just seems to fit in with those strategies pretty well, especially when you're like, I just want to have a huge board and swing in for a bunch of damage, and proliferating a bunch of counters on when you can cast a 7-drop is pretty good. And Commander is a place where you get to play those big spells anyway, and so I think this is worth a shot. But we haven't even touched on the other 2 abilities here. which you know, getting permanents back from your graveyard, that is super helpful. And um, I believe that the best rate for getting a card from your graveyard to your hand is 2 mana. Though this is limited to permanents, so I mean, if you're playing a creature heavy deck or enchantment heavy deck, whatever, this is going to get back a lot of cards for you if you want. And so 4 cards times 2 is 8, and this costs 7, so it's got a good rate going for it. And the other is the life gain. If you choose to gain the, was it 4 life? I believe it's 4. 4 times, you're gaining 16 life, which is half of your starting life total, almost half of your starting life total in Commander. So I think the applications of Plane-Wide Celebration is pretty good. I like that it's kind of reminiscent of the Confluence cycle. The only problem I have with it is how expensive it is. So will it see like competitive EDH play? Probably not, but I still think it's a cool card and worth the top 10 spot. Then on to number 9. We've got Tomik, Distinguished Advocist. This is another card that interacts with lands, or kind of rather, you know, keeps your opponents from interacting with lands. And so this kind of just shuts down like land destruction. So like your wastelands, your strip lines, dust bowls, ghost quarters, field of ruins. Those are just kind of dead cards for your opponent. And on top of that, if there is a deck that likes to mess with lands out of the graveyard, they can't really do that either. So I think what separates Tomik from like Living Twister, which is, you know, because this card has a lot to do with lands, is the fact that it's legendary. And so, however, I'm not quite sure what the build around for Tomik would be in that instance. So, but aside from that, he's like a good tax commander in a way, right? He prevents things from happening, or it keeps your opponents from doing things that they would maybe be doing, and keeps them from playing lands from their graveyard. So I think it would fit good in like a taxing deck, like, you know, white black or something along those lines, or in like a good control deck, just as like kind of like a silver bullet, just in case you go into like your local game store and you're playing with different people all the time, and sometimes you run across land destruction. I think it's just worth that include there. But other than that, like the thing that puts it so low on my list here is the fact that how do you build around this as a commander, right? And so uh, that's kind of where I landed on it. But I still think it's a cool card. It's a cheap creature, and it's got pretty good stats for that, and it's got good abilities for that as well, especially in Commander, where just about anything goes, right? So yeah, I like Tomik quite a bit, but he's just not quite cutting through um, for me just yet. I'd have to see some gameplay. So like, if you guys know of some gameplay with Tomik that you'd like to share with me, go ahead and put it in the comments, because I would like to see what people are doing with this deck, or any ideas that you would do as a build around for Tomik. So there's that. Now that's 8 drop, or my top 8 and my top 7 are both board wipes. I thought it's important to include board wipes in these types of lists because the go-to board wipes are just so expensive. But let's start with number 8 with Solar Blaze. I think it's a decent board wipe for its cost. It does have to compete with the White Wraths as well as Damnation if you're dabbling in that Mardu control. But it's a really good early game wipe if you know your friends or somebody in your play group is playing tokens. That just kind of takes them out of the equation for, you know, maybe a turn or two. Or maybe it'll just help you equalize the board later on in the game. The problem that I have with it though is it's not like a full board wipe. It's you know, like if something has protection from red or white, this isn't going to hit it. Obviously, you know, there's indestructible. Anything that has a higher toughness than its power is safe, so it just doesn't hit everything, and so that's kind of problematic for me. But number 7 is Time Wipe, and I really like this card because, you know, not all blue-white decks are full control, and the ones that are play like important creatures, and so if you have to wipe the board for any reason, it's kind of nice to bounce something back. Again, you know, this has to compete with other board wipes that are just kind of better than it in as far as like killing creatures and stuff that and are cheaper, like, again, Damnation, Wrath of God, you know, the White Wraths, Supreme Verdict is definitely a better card, but like this cool interaction though, right? Say you have a Sun Titan, you bounce it, blow up the board, your next turn you play it and get back something that you just blew up. So it works well in like those kind of strategies, maybe if you're doing like an Esper thing or something like that. I think it's got some potential, but again, it still has to compete with those things. But board wipes like Wrath of God and Damnation, what is Wrath of God, like $7-8 right now, and Damnation is 30 and probably climbing because it's like the only black card that does that for that cheap, so with no drawbacks. So I mean, as far as budget is concerned, I think Time Wipe is there. I mean, even Supreme Verdict is an expensive board wipe, um, and it costs one less. It's almost the same casting cost. It just costs one less. But yeah, so I thought these would be here. I think it's always important to include these because for budget players, it's sometimes you might not have the opportunity to get a Damnation or a Wrath of God or something like that. It's just out of your budget, and Time Wipe is just cheap enough for you to be able to get it and use it effectively, I would say. Um, then at number 6, we have Mizium Tank. I wrote in my my list here on Microsoft Word, it's an effing tank. But what's really cool about this is that it's not a creature. So it dodges, like, creature-based removal, board wipes, the ones that aren't instant speed. And it's got trample. And its ability allows you to not even have to have a creature on the battlefield at all. And if you're kind of going off with, I wouldn't say Storm because it doesn't care about copying spells, but it does care about, what it does care about is, you casting them. And it gets a power bonus, it becomes a creature, and it has trample. So I think in decks that don't want to run a lot of creatures in the first place, I think Mizium Tank is a good way to get some damage in, and then maybe even be a good way to kind of like close out some games, or at least knock an opponent out of a game. So I really like this card. Some places I would put it is, like in Mizzix, in blue-red Spellslinger type stuff, where you're going to be casting a lot of instant sorceries anyway, maybe Jeskai. Um, it works well in like Narset and stuff, even though you probably don't want to be playing it, kind of wastes a slot, and maybe because Narset wants to cast giant things anyway, but hey, if you have a way to, I guess maybe not Narset, but Jeskai still, if you're casting instants and sorceries, you're going to get this to be a creature, and it's going to be able to attack, and it gets the power boost the second it turns into one, so you have a 4/3 attacker instead of a 3/2 if you just crewed it naturally. I really just kind of like how this has a way to get around the crew ability, but it can still be crewed. Mizium Tank's a pretty cool card, and just the fact it says Mizium in it, and I'm a big fan of Mizzix anyway, so like I kind of have to give some love to this card in the first place. Then on to number 5, we have another legendary creature. It's the last one on the list, but I feel like he deserves some praise here, and it's Neheb Dreadhorde Champion. Um, so he's a little bit different than the last mono red Neheb. I think that one was you got red for the amount of life an opponent lost, but this one gives you like a little bit of like some, I would say, card filtering. It's not quite card advantage, but if like you can hit for 5 and discard 5 cards, maybe you want to get rid of some lands because you're going to be making mana anyway, you can do some pretty cool stuff with that, and then you get to draw a whole new hand. So it's kind of like you're fueling up and you're loaded, ready to go, and you can cast whatever's in your hand after you deal damage. And it's probably, so again, with legendary creatures, why they would get a better ranking than some cards on the list is because they can be a commander. And so this Neheb as a commander, I think is, I would say maybe just a little bit better than the red-black. Well, it's better than the red-black one for sure. Maybe a little bit better than the other one. I think that the fact that the last 2 Nehebs haven't had black in their mana cost kind of does a disservice, but this one cares about dealing damage, and so you play an all-out aggro thing, you can do a Voltron thing, like you can easily play some really good equipment and attach them to Neheb post-combat very easily, I would think. And then the more power you get onto him, the better he is. the better his ability gets. So I think there's a lot of cool things that this card can do. And again, it's a commander. You can put it into any red commander deck. So Naheb's got some cool things going for him, and that's why he's at number 5. And now now we're in the top 5. We're starting to get to some of the what I think are probably my favorite bulk rare cards from the set. So number 4 is Casualties of War. This card is nuts. When I was thinking about doing Commander deck techs, I was going to do the Ur-Dragon first. And my first iteration of the deck had Reign of Thorns, and this was pre-War of the Spark. War of the Spark came out, and I pulled the Casualties of War, and I was like, why not just run that? Because the mana fixing in that deck is just nuts. It's perfect. This card does everything Reign of Thorns does, but lets you kill a creature and a Planeswalker as well. So getting to blow up 5 things for 6 mana, I think, is good. And I think that this is a I would almost say it's at least a green-black staple and can go into probably most 3, 4, and 5 colored decks if your mana base allows it. But this is just a good all-around like insurance policy. You know, there's a Winter Orb over there. We can get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. I don't know, Teferi, the mono blue one. He's problematic. Let's get rid of Sphere of Safety, Ghostly Prison stuff. Maybe that Rhystic Studies just getting a little too out of hand. Nobody wants to pay for it. Let's kill that Kozilek that just came into play. So much stuff. So much stuff to kill, you know? So little time. Blow up Maze of Iths. Any other problematic lands, you know? There's a lot of things. I really like this card, as you can tell. Then we get to number 3, and we have Soul Diviner. Now, I was having a hard time deciding on the top 3 because there were 2 that I for sure wanted to include on this list, and I just wasn't sure. But Soul Diviner is really cool. I think this would make good for like in a like Sultai counters matters deck, where you can like have ways of untapping permanents and then tapping them again. This removes a counter from Dark Depths for free. You untap it and you're removing 2. That's 6 mana worth of value out of just, you know, going to town with some untapped synergy. But other than that, you know, like if you're running counters matters anyway, if you put counters on this, you can. I'm pretty sure you can remove them from him. If not, you'll tell me. I'll put a message somewhere and say I was wrong. But it's repeatable card advantage, and I think that's good. And it's usually you don't get a tap draw card on standard cards anymore. And this has a small activation cost. That's not a big deal, removing a counter, especially if you're in a deck that's already putting a ton of counters on things in the first place. And I mentioned earlier with Planewide Celebration, like that Atraxa Precon counters and like Ishai and Rayan. Just, you're going to be putting counters on things anyway. You might as well just be using a Soul Diviner, put some counters on it, and then use those counters to draw some cards. I love it. I mean, and it's a 2-drop. It can come down early if you want. And you can follow it up with something that enters with counters, like a Rayan, and then later on an Ishai, you know, kind of things like that, that are going to let you just start drawing cards for essentially nothing. Really like Soul Diviner. I think it's a good card, right? I'd like to think so. It's for the price tag anyway, right? That's what we're here for. We're turning trash into treasure. Let's get to number 2, and it's Domri, Anarch of Bolas. You want a 3-drop Anthem. Granted, it only gives a power boost, but hey, you're in green-red at that point. You just care about dealing damage, and toughness doesn't matter, right? And control hate? Yes, let's take that. So Domri is just... I really like these Planeswalkers with static abilities, primarily because, you know, oh man, they're not like enchantments, right? You could just hit the Planeswalker and kill them, so I don't think they're overpowered. I think that they're like balanced pretty well, and this Domri just does a good job of kind of doing that for you. So it's going to give you a little bit of ramp, keep your creatures from being countered. That's always nice, especially in a format like Commander where you have really cheap counter spells, some that are even free. Um, and Domri is going to kind of put a stop to that on your creatures. And if you're playing green-red, you're playing creatures anyway. And I haven't even touched on his last ability, which lets you, is like red-green, some of red-green's best creature removal is fighting. There are some, I like the ones that where they deal damage instead of them just fighting, but still, if you have a way to like have your biggest creature take out problematic creatures on the board, Domri can do it. And I can't get over the 3-drop anthem stuff. Like, uh, most anthems should be 3 mana, and they should have. I mean, I don't know what I'm saying here. I'm just getting worked up over Domri, but he's a really good planeswalker, and I think it's kind of crazy that he's not seeing as much play in Standard even. And I think that he could shine in Commander just because of the fact that you're going to be dealing damage. He's going to boost your team. He's going to get around control pretty easily. He's going to ramp you a little bit. And he lets your creatures fight. And I didn't even mention that his first ability, that mana can be spent on anything. It's not like Sarkhan from M19 where you have to cast a dragon with that mana. You can just cast whatever you want. So it is kind of like a mana rock in a way that anthems your team and lets them fight. And I like that quite a bit. Now, number 1, my favorite card from the set, perhaps, but also probably the best bulk rare in the set by far, is Vivian's Arcbow. Whew. I have a lot to say about this, but I'm just going to tell you what's in my script, and it's wow. Just wow. What can you do with this? Anything, right? Oh, man. Where do you even start? You get to, what's nice about this card, first of all, is, like, effects like See the Unwritten, or, like, I guess Tooth and Nail. They're really expensive. Well, Tooth and Nail is not exactly the same. Let's not go to Tooth and Nail. There's a reason why that card's good. See the Unwritten, like Genesis Hydra effects, I guess. Oath of Druids. Things that let you get creatures from your library and then throw them into the graveyard are kind of detrimental to some decks, right? Because you're not always going to have a way to get them out. Vivian's Arcbow puts them on the bottom in a random order. You don't care. You draw a land late game. You can pass Buff of Counterspell, and on your opponent's end step, you just dump all your mana, drop the land, get you whatever creatures in the top, whatever. I've been using this in, I believe it's in my Rashmi, and I'm actually almost certain it's in my Rashmi. I just want to show it off because I have a foil, and it's really gorgeous. But this is a deck that it's I don't know. It's just good for any green deck, right? Because in the late game, you don't want to be just drawing lands unless you have a way for them to pay off, like a Tatyova or like an Omnath or something like that, where it's worth drawing an extra land all the time. Almost worth drawing a extra land all the time. Where you at, Arcbow? This just kind of gives you like I would say it's better than card advantage. It lets you dig, and when you're playing a creature heavy deck, here you go. The light's not doing it justice. Neither are these Eclipse sleeves. I'm sorry, Ultra Pro, but like, you gotta shine those up a little bit. Look at that. This is a 2-drop artifact. It's legendary, so but who cares about that? You can only run one of it in Commander anyway. Discard a card, spend X, tap it. Look at the top X cards of your library. Put a creature card with commander mana cost X or less onto the battlefield. Put the rest of them on the bottom in a random order. I mean, the card is just so good, and I'm surprised. I think the primary reason why it's so cheap is that Standard probably doesn't want to run that. It's a late game tool, but in Commander and you're playing green, you're going to be ramping. You do this in Elves and get more Elves, you know, whatever. There's a lot of applications just for Vivian's Arcbow to be in almost every green deck. It could be, I just can't stress this enough, right? Like, it could be mono green, 2 color with green, 3 color with green, 4, 5. The only thing you can't run in is colorless. I mean, but again, this card is just nuts. And I've been using it since I pulled mine, and it's just been a super good card all around. Um, I don't feel that. I mean, I will say there are times where you're like, I probably shouldn't drop this card, and so it's maybe not worth playing all the time. But like early game, turn 2, you could drop this when you have nothing else to do. Late game, you could drop this, have some extra mana up to fish through the top 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 cards of your library and get a pretty good card. Nothing is. I mean, you can spend 8 mana and discard a land to potentially get a Crater Hoof or anything else that seems good for the situation off the top of your library. But I'm getting a little too worked up about this card. This card's really good. I'm really excited about it. I really like this card, and I think there's a reason why it's a #1 here. It just is. I just think it's probably, like I said, this is my favorite card from the set, just because I play enough green to where having something that negates a land draw should be in my deck, right? But yeah, I mean, this just goes in there. And I'm pretty sure the regular version is less than $1, maybe $1. I don't know. Oh, it's crazy. I really like it though. I mean, I've had a lot to say about it. Probably a couple minutes worth of just talking about it, showing it off, even. But I think I would like to I'm just gonna say it, put it out there. This is a green staple. You can fight me about that. I don't care. I think this is an excellent card for green to have. It's powerful, but well balanced, and uh, I think that's what we like to see out of upcoming sets. We don't want a bunch of overpowered stuff, and we don't want rares that are just too weak. Trust me, we get enough of those that we don't even feel like we could play them in Commander. But this is one of those cards, and I'm just saying, while it's cheap, I think it's worth picking up. So anyway, there you have it. That is my From Trash to Treasure first episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments. Give me a like, subscribe if you haven't already. Next Trash for Treasure will be probably in a couple weeks. I want to give Modern Horizons a little bit of time to kind of settle. We just had the modern banning, so maybe some price changes are coming in the next week or two, and I just want to make sure that I have a good amount of time between each set to where I can analyze what I would consider bulk and bring you another list like this. But so look forward to those. Not a whole lot. We've got more gameplay footage for PlayStation coming out soon. We're gonna get back into Arena because the new season just started. We want to try and climb back out into Gold, but right now it kind of sucks. I'm getting tired of playing Mono Red. I'll say that. But let's see, what else do we got coming down? Do have some new ideas. I do want to bring some more Commander content to my page because again, that's what I play in paper. It's my preferred format, and so I'm thinking instead of doing full deck text, I could just put together a primer, talk about the deck, best interactions in the deck, put the list. I don't know, something like that. It's a work in progress. I do want to do something about that, but we'll get to that point when we get there. But for right now, just keep your eyes open for Modern Horizons, Trash to Treasure episode, and keep your eyes out for other things. All right, that's all I got for you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Uh, be kind, spread the love. See you guys next time. Have a good one.